Welcome to Cultivate with Jessica Taghap, a new podcast exploring different art forms and their creative processes through interviews with some of the most exciting artists working today. From an unexpected message on LinkedIn to witnessing an equally unexpected night at the theater, first-time theater maker Colleen Murphy keeps on surprising us all with her debut play, I Wore What Went, featuring actor Michelle Shupe and directed by Shole Milos. I Wore What Went is a piece that explores memory and trauma. I'm sitting down today with all three to talk about the process of bringing this story to the stage. We talk about Colleen's experience stepping into the role of a playwright for the first time, how Michelle and Shole navigated her own steps on stage in the role of Maura, and what they each took away from collaborating with one another.
So the
Great.
two of you, why don't you introduce yourselves and then I'll share the good news. How's that?
Fine. Shole, you go first.
I'm Shole Milos. My background is really a little bit of everything. I started as an actor. I became a director. I do movement. So I'm kind of one of those people who's done a little bit of everything for a long time. A lot of my work was in children's theater and theater for young adults for a while. So I've kind of done everything from musical theater to children's theater. So, and Michelle and I know each other through our other lives that we have. So.
Good. My name is Michelle Shupe. I am an actor, director, voiceover person. I do a lot of audiobooks on the side, as well as several other fun jobs. So I'm a big fan of the podcast. So thanks for having us on.
So Jessica
Right.
Colleen Murphy, I'm playwright of I Wore What When, and on Sunday, the United Solo Festival held its closing ceremony, and Michelle was awarded Best Actress, and I was awarded Best Script. So we just found that out yesterday because we were not in New York. We weren't able to attend. And it's the first time that we're all together. So with the exception of emails and texts flying back and forth, we're beyond excited.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And hopefully this affords you and the play as a whole for more opportunities to be seen and performed. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, on that very exciting note, shall we get started?
Sure.
Sure. Great. Okay, so I want to first start off with Colleen in terms of just going from your day job as working in the health and wellness sector to pivoting towards writing for theater. What was sort of the impetus for the project? I know it definitely is based on your experiences growing up, but sort of why or how did it sort of start building up as something that you wanted to produce and write?
Well, Jessica, thank you. It started, a few years ago. I had come back from my 40th high school reunion, and I was having a dinner party at my home, and my friends were asking me about the evening. They knew that I grew up in Massachusetts. They knew that through Spotlight and, some of the other stories about the Catholic Church and pedophile priests in Massachusetts, that the town that I grew up in was affected, and that I had hoped to go to this reunion. And um, I hoped that my classmate who had been abused as a child would be there. And of course, I didn't know that that would be the case. But my friends at this dinner table were asking me about the event and the fact that I was able to spend the evening with my classmate and sort of talk about this. And at the end of the dinner party, I took my glass of wine and I went to my computer and I wrote 1,000 words. And, partly it was just because at the table, just the story so engaged the people at the table. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And in the morning, I looked at it again and I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. And I signed up for playwriting, a playwriting class at the Graham School at the University of Chicago. And then over the course of the next year and a half or so, and a series of classes there, um, built out the script. So that's the story. And yeah, that's the story. And yes, during my day job, I write strategic plans and executive summaries and PowerPoints about healthcare. So, and there is um, the word health is not used once in my script, so which still stuns me. But yeah, so that's how it got started.
Yeah, there's no word health in it, but
Um,
it is all about a different sort of health, and a
it
different
is.
sort
It
of
is all
wellness.
about well-being. Correct.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, for sure. Um, so uh, what I'm interested in is that it definitely sort of plays with the idea of autobiography and autofiction. And I wanted to know sort of um, what sort of how you came to the decision of having an actress sort of portray uh, this character that you wrote based on your experiences rather than sort of what we see in a traditional solo performance piece where usually the writer and the actor is the same person. So talk to me a little bit about sort of
Well,
what
so first of all,
how that was
it's these
conceptualized.
are my memories, but it is all a true story. Okay, so it was not meant to be fictional at all. It's all based on true stories. And yeah, that was an easy decision because I am not an actress. I had the good fortune of knowing Shoal's husband, Richard, who, as I was telling him about this play that I had written, suggested that Shoal read it. And he did, and he liked it. And at the time, he said, if this ever gets selected by a festival, I would love to direct it. And I remember thinking, wow, that is freaking cool. And then when the play was accepted at the United Solo Festival, Scholl said, I've got, you know, actresses who would be great for this part. And he brought Michelle to the table. And I've totally trusted the two of them, to take it and make it happen, which they did.
Shole, what was it about Michelle that made her sort of your first choice?
Well, it's kind of funny
Um,
because you and I have known each other a while, but we've never worked together in that capacity. And it was funny because the United Solo Fest thing kind of came about really quickly, and we were picking a date. And because I had said, "Oh, I'll do this," and then suddenly it was real. And I was literally passing Michelle in the hallway, and I was in my head going, "Who am I going to do that?" I'm like, and Michelle walked by, and I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I think of this? And I think when I saw you, and I said, Michelle, I have this thing that we're going to be working on. I think you would be really good. I'm like, I'm going to send it to you, and tell me what you think. But it was that thing where I was going through my head, going, one, I know Colleen already, so I'm trying to emulate someone that maybe would understand that, but also I just wanted someone who would be very good at it. And two people came to my mind, Michelle and another person. And I sent the script to Michelle, and Michelle was like, "I really like it," and she's like, "I'm in." So before we know it, the ball started rolling there. But I trusted Michelle and her sensibility to be able to do this. And I think one of the things that Michelle said to me afterwards, she said, "Oh, it's really good storytelling." And it is. I mean, it is recounting stories. And I think the fact that when I first read the play, I that was one of the things that struck me was that I'm like, this is really good storytelling. And I was, I to be honest, I didn't know what to think when my husband said, "Oh, I'm going to have you read Colleen's play," or like, "I offered you to read Colleen's play," and I'm like, "Don't do this to me. What if I don't like it?" But then, as it turned out, I did, and I really wanted to support Colleen because I thought she had a really lovely piece. I thought that what I liked about it, it was, it was coming from her place, and it was honest, and I never felt like it was preachy, which I think can be a trap for these things. One of the things, and I think it's a thing that we really looked for, is the emotion about what's happened, you know. So even though Maura in the place, yes, she's upset about things, but she's questioning why somebody can do these things or how could this happen. And I thought that was a really very honest take on the subject matter. But it's not only, not only in the abuse, but just generally, it's like you look at these things and how could people do that? And that to me seemed to be a very telling thing, a very telling question to come out because I felt like it was something that was very honest. Because you do, I mean, in our world, there are things that happen, and I find myself saying, how the hell does that happen? Why does that happen? And I think that was one of the things that really drew me to the piece. I appreciated the honesty. I appreciated the way the stories were told. And I personally understood the memory of connecting it to something you wore. Because I know that I have those memories about, there's certain things that I know or pieces of clothing I have that I connect to events in my life or things in my life or people in my life. So I gravitated toward that. Of course, the first thing I said to Colleen was, that there's this play called Love Lost in What I Wore. So I said to Colleen immediately, that there's a play. She goes, yeah, I know. I thought you did when I said that, but I was
When
worried
I
about
wrote the play, I didn't know. I found out during the playwriting courses. But the funny thing is, Michelle
has
done a production of
Michelle
it,
has performed that
right?
play.
I performed the show with Broadway in Chicago. I was their understudy, and then when a castmate went out, I ended up going on for her, which was really fun. So I do, really just shows with clothes in it.
Was there anything, Michelle, that you took sort of from that experience with Love Loss and sort of either brought it into this performance or just sort of helped inform sort of the character's relationship with memory and clothing?
I mean, not
Um,
only in the sense that everything that you do informs everything else that you do in the future, but I think they're two very different plays. I think Colleen's delves into some really difficult conversations about what happened with the diocese and um, what she went through, all of the things that she talks about, and the clothes are a way into that. Love Lost in What I Wore is also equally fascinating piece and super fun and talks about life and different events in life. But I think it would be fair to say that they're two very different pieces.
right,
I think my concern for Colleen was that if somebody saw the title, they would immediately make a comparison without looking at it. So my only concern was because I was encouraging her. I'm like, you need to submit the script to places to see. And my only concern was that somebody would see the title and compare it and toss it without reading it and understand that they're very, very completely different things. But, you know.
um, right, and that would be doing a disservice to Colleen's work, um, you know, if we were going by that. So I want to sort of ask about sort of what your process was like in taking on the role. How how much of a collaboration was there between you and Colleen, if any, in terms of talking about the memories, talking about the subject matter?
Sure. Thank you for asking. My process began with meeting Colleen for the first time, and we did talk quite a bit about all of her different memories. And if I had a question, I would go to her and talk to her about it. And a lot of acting, I think, especially when it comes to a one-person show like this, if the person that wrote it is still um, active and still with us is observational. So I spent a lot of time, Colleen probably has figured this out by now, but I spent a lot of time observing her and watching her mannerisms and seeing kind of how she is in the world so that I could be as truthful to her while sort of portraying her. Not that Maura is exactly Colleen, but I there's a real great intelligence and charming approach to everything that Colleen does. She's just grace, just so graceful. And so it's really wonderful to watch and to try to emulate. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it is getting all your lines memorized, obviously.
A lot of
And
lines,
then
Michelle.
yes, it is. Um, and one of the things that I think is so unique about Colleen's piece is that it is so modern. The way that she's written it has a very, very contemporary feel to it. And so she writes like people talk. So you're talking about one thing, you were talking about one thing, you tangent over here to talk about something else, and then you come back. So
Right.
that was an interesting challenge to try to make sure that I was hooking all of that together. And then from there, it's just like anything. It's just rehearse, rehearse, rehearse.
Right, right.
I hope
Yeah,
that answered the question.
yes, you did. Yeah, it definitely there is a certain flow to it where it's one of those things where a memory can spark a different memory and then that sort of takes over. What I also kind of liked in the performance was sort of the flow of movement, the changing of the costumes in front of the audience, going into one scene after another, having it sort of punctuate, but also be part of the transition in a way. So I want to know sort of what that process was like. I know, Shole, um, you're a movement specialist as well. Was there anything sort of from your knowledge of that that you took into breaking down the blocking and stuff for Michelle and Michelle, sort of what was that process like
Um,
for you as well?
I would say a lot of the things with the changing and stuff, when we started working with pieces and we had to switch things out and there was last minute, like we need some hooks on this. I would say that we talked a lot about what the pieces meant. So sometimes, putting them on the way they were put on sometimes, what did this piece mean to you? Clearly the way they were taken off, some things were thrown to the floor. There's the one piece with the white raincoat that is kind of folded and placed down. So, and also sometimes she didn't put something on right away. She described it. We played with the ideas of like that almost being, because there's a few times where we talk about shopping for things. So we have the rack and we kind of played with that being a rack in a clothing store. So it was trying to find ways that one were a variation of how clothes came on and off, but also things that made sense within the story that was being told. So it was just kind of finding those things because it would get, from an audience standpoint, it gets very boring to watch somebody put the clothes on and take them off the same way. But it was also because there was a relationship to each of these pieces in these stories. It was also, what did that piece mean? Um, and, if you look at the end, the last thing that is the dress from the reunion, and the only other piece is the leopard skin coat, which was something that that Maura says, I've had this for 20 years. It was a statement piece. So those were the only things that we see. And things get thrown on the floor for different reasons in different ways. So that was it. We were just trying to connect the clothing, what it meant, and how it came off. So I think that was an exploration with both Michelle and I. We would kind of talk about it, and some of it was practical, and some of it was like, damn it, I can't get this thing off. So
In which
that was
case,
kind of
they
that
would
was
call me and say, Colleen, go to eBay again.
we need to find it.
Let's try something else. We need something with short sleeves, or we need something that buttons in the front.
Yeah.
Right.
So eBay was our friend throughout this process.
So it's a combination of like the actual items of clothing as well as other found pieces that had to work with the movement. Michelle, what was your way into sort of the movement uh, process on the other side of it?
Well, I think, I mean, Shole and I, as he said, I think we worked through it really organically. So I think it was, and Colleen has written a lot of it in her script. She intends for those to
Yeah.
be transitions. So it's already
Yeah.
there for you. So it was really about us interpreting it. So a red jumper in a scene that is about an assault is handled very differently than, say, uh, leopard skin raincoat where we get to meet, um, Stacey and Clinton. So they're all handled really differently. And I tried to be mindful of that. But at the end of the day, you have the time in Colleen's beautiful transitions to you look at it on the rack, you pull it off, you introduce it to the audience, and you're sort of setting the stage for what the next scene is going to be, and you're setting the tone for it right there with that piece of clothing, as well as talking about where it came from and what that uh, means to you and to Maura. And so I'm also uh, in my 50s, and so I know a lot of these places that go out of business and that are still around, and I've shopped at
Loman's,
almost,
styling
yeah, all
space.
of them. Right, exactly.
Yep. I know that like clothing and costume definitely can be sort of, um, as they say, kind of half the battle in terms of how an actor portrays themselves physically. Were there any specific examples in how each um, item of clothing, each costume sort of helped in your performance? Because I mean, I'll let you talk about it at most, but I definitely noticed sort of little subtleties in like sort of portraying her from, elementary school age up until, when she's older. So if you can sort of speak to that.
Sure. I mean, I think every piece of clothing, every article that you choose to put on your body and what Colleen chose, um, ages Maura up through the years as she goes through that timeline. So, but obviously the red jumper, I'm a kid still, right? And then you get into the plaid jumper, which is parochial school, and that also has a certain movement to it. Then you're getting into the jean skirt, and that's college. And so the articles of clothing, I don't think consciously made a choice, although Shoal can talk to this a little bit. We did make a conscious choice with the red jumper and the plaid jumper, but the other things are just, it's how the outfit makes you feel. And this is where Colleen has it all over me in terms of fashion. She knows exactly what you should be wearing when. And she's got a beautiful fashion sense. And so it's really just then about what it makes you feel.
Yes, definitely. And Shoal, if you can sort of jump in.
Yeah, I mean the jumper, the interesting thing about the structure of the piece is, we kind of learn the premise and we're always going back to the reunion, but within the second scene, we have an attack. And it's a little, it's jarring. It's jarring, but it's what happened. So I think that that's the first time that, that's a piece to, like she says, it's like a family thing, and I love it. There's a lot of times where Maura talks about how she feels about the clothing. And so there is emotion attached to it as well, because this might be something that you love, and all of a sudden you will never wear that again because it has bad memories. I work outside of my life in the theater, and I've worked with some people who sexual assault nursing examination, and it's a very interesting thing when they have to collect clothing from people and how they say that these that people say, "Do you want your items back?" And people are like, "No, burn it, take it away."
Right.
So I think that
Yeah.
there's emotion connected to it. So that's why, we talk about it. So, but it is how you make you feel. I think one of the funniest things for me is when she's going to the court the first time and she's, in California wearing this, this wool blazer and this like buttoned up thing and even acknowledges like this is too much for her. But I think it makes her feel like I'm going to go in as my professional self into the court, because she's going to go there and do her duty as a good citizen who's going to go to court, be on a jury, and then finds out what the jury is about. So it's a very different thing. It's also like Michelle was saying too. It's different stages in your life and maybe how your taste changed. Or is it just a trend that you jumped into? Because
Or
I'm
is it a
guilty.
suit of armor? I mean, is it a
Yeah,
suit of armor? Because that very first jury scene, it could be. It has more lining than most women
yeah,
in California have on clothes.
yeah.
Yeah, clothing can definitely be um, a way to present your different selves, both public and private facing. So, but I'm gonna go back a little bit to Colleen in terms of just how you were able to sort of parse your memories when writing the play. Did you have to do any sort of additional research in terms of getting the timeline right, or uh, yeah, sort of helping visualize certain things, or enriching certain scenes?
Well, yes, I did. Fortunately, I was working, again with the Graham School playwriting class and playwriting classes over a period of a year, year and a half or so. And so, every week we had an assignment and, I would bring, the next 10 pages and my classmates would read and I would be able to, make adjustments accordingly. But, I have kept a journal since college. So I was able to go, wait a minute, I was living in Long Beach and what year would that have been? And kind of able to like flip through pages and go, okay, this was, this year. Other times it was like, okay, when did that Boston Globe article come out? Like, somebody had said to me, like, what year was that? I off the top of my head, I wouldn't have known. But I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I was able to find that date and, in fact, it was a Sunday morning. And I'm like, okay, now I know specifically how to sort of, what I was doing, but I could be as accurate as possible with regards to, key dates. So some of it was, just stuff that I could find publicly. And then other things were things that I could track down in my journal or, other documentation that I had. So yes, and that was important to me that it be as, factually correct as possible.
Michelle, if you're still there, um, was there any sort of additional research as well that you had to do, aside from sort of referencing Colleen's memories and conversing and collaborating with her? Did you have to sort of look into any research in terms of sexual abuse survivors, things of that nature?
I didn't do that because I had Colleen as a resource, so I could talk to her about what her experiences were, which seemed the most important to me. Um, However, I will tell you a fun story, which is so Colleen at one point is Maura is moved from the parochial school to the public school, and she meets the homeroom teacher. And I thought it would be really fun to have a Boston dialect in there. And I am not familiar with the Boston dialect, even though I have a whole bunch of family from Boston. So I called them. They couldn't like reproduce it for me. So I called an actor friend and I said, "Hey, do we know anybody that speaks a Boston dialect?" And she said, "Yeah, in fact, I know somebody right now." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to send you 2 lines. Can he please record them for me and then send them?" He turned it right around. And then I just, if that's research, I think it is, honestly. Then I was walking around the block trying to replicate that. And I was pleased to find that I actually think that I did achieve it when I was speaking to Brad, the real Brad, at the party afterwards. I could hear it. I could hear the changes. So success.
Nice, nice.
Well, and,
Um,
and Michelle, you said you did the same with Mother Superior. Tell the Mother Superior story.
Well, so Mother Superior was interesting because um, Shoal and I were talking about it, and I had originally kind of wanted her to maybe sound like the nun in doubt or somebody in Spotlight or something like that. And Shoal and I in rehearsal kind of ended up with I kept straying back toward the nuns in The Sound of Music. So
yeah.
we sort of leaned into that a little bit. So she ended up sounding probably a little reminiscent of Katharine Hepburn, honestly.
Mm.
Yeah.
The that whole transatlantic type of accent.
Yeah, she was definitely Mother Superior with a hint of Catherine Pepper. Yes.
Yes, right, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, having played I played Tracy Lord in the Philadelphia Story at one point, so it was within my grasp that Katharine Hepburn-esque speak. So that's sort of what we landed on.
You had it in your arsenal
I guess
already.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I want to sort of get back to sort of that idea because it is a solo performance. How did you and Shoal sort of find a good balance in terms of not having it be too cartoony or you know, not overdoing the Boston accent, not overdoing
Mm.
the Sound of Music then, that kind of
What a good
thing.
question. Yeah, what a good question. I'm going to let Shoal talk about that, but I want to tell you that mostly I relied on Shoal. Like I came up with what I thought they sounded like in my head, and then Shoal was the one that got to go more, more, more,
Mhm,
too much, you know?
mhm.
So,
I think one of the things that I think Colleen does well in the play was one of the things that we talked about. There's a lot of times where she's sitting because she's at this, kind of begrudgingly at the reunion and there and so sitting. So I think anytime that there was a lot of information, I think sitting was a really good choice because it's really for the audience. So there was a lot of times where, especially in those conversations with Brad, because we wanted to create this sense that even though we never see him, that we get a sense that he's always there, that he's present. And one of the things that we really played a lot with, which Colleen does, that I feel like at this reunion, every archetype and stereotype of somebody that you went to high school is there. So those were fun people that we could blow up a little bit. We talk about the chatterbox and the guy was like, hey, and so those we could blow up. But then, it was finding other people who were a balance of things. So it was finding the moments that I think need to resonate and be very truthful. Those people were as realistic or as simple as we would make them, and then we can make the other characters blow up. But I love just the notion when we discovered the Harrods woman with the raincoat, like she's exactly someone I've seen at Harrods. It's kind of what Michelle sort of created out of it, but it's actually, yeah, you're this woman I've seen in shops in London. So it was just trying to find the balance because one of the things that we were talking about was, there's humor in the play. There's things that are funny. And we didn't want to shy away from that. But it was interesting the first time we sort of performed it for a small group of friends. Our concern was I hope that they feel comfortable laughing. So I think some of those things that happen in the reunion that people find funny, because I think that anybody in the audience who's been to a high school reunion, I think those things are universal. And so I think a lot of those people that we know, the jock, the cheerleader, and that sort of thing that we've seen in every kind of high school thing from Greece to whatever the modern equivalent is. Those we could blow up. We could make them caricatures because they're not really. They're those people. And then also it also allowed us a chance to sort of lighten the story a little bit. But I think that, just finding the moments that you have to be this other person. I mean, a lot of times it's just one line, but it's also what is the impact of that person? It's like the person who and the second court scene is like, oh yeah, that was quite a story. It's that asshole, that, but it's trying to find the reality of those people versus the reality of the people who are bigger. So, but we wanted to also get people a way into the story. They might not have an experience with any kind of assault or abuse themselves, but a lot of people have been to high school and a lot of people have been to a reunion. So it's finding the way in through those people and through some of those characters so that people could get into the story, whether they understand it or not. They find themselves hopefully getting caught up in what's going on, just following what's happening.
Right, right. It was definitely very compelling to watch for sure. Just want to sort of go back to Colleen and ask about sort of the overall experience. Well, actually, I can throw it to all three of you. Sort of what was sort of your takeaway in terms of just collaborating on this project as a whole, and just the experience in general.
Well, I would start out by saying we created an incredible team. You know, I think that, we all have day jobs, different, parts of our lives where we talk about teamwork. And we created a very high functioning team without ever having really worked together in this kind of setting before. And, each one of us brought our best game, and, delivered at sort of the highest level of professionalism. And, part of me just says, wow, we were just damn lucky. And then, good people came together who had, terrific experiences and then gelled and everyone sort of, did their piece. Michelle talked about the first night that we were kind of all together when I first met her. And, she came with a 3-ring binder with the script in it. And it had, yeah, she's laughing. And it had all these little
Tell us a little
stickies in
OCD.
it. She had all these stickies in it. And she had her memorization timeline, her schedule. And I just remember thinking, we're good. Like, I just thought to myself, like, okay, this is a professional who knows how to, and then she had her series of questions for me. And I thought, okay, I feel a whole lot better here. And then, just to watch them, go through we had an initial reading. And then they kind of said to me, we don't want you around for a while. Like, we're going to go do our thing.
He didn't phrase it that way.
Michelle's going to memorize. They're going to go through. And then I started getting like, hey, could you look at this page and just make sure that this word is correct and, whatnot. And then we all came back together after like a month or so, and they're like, we're ready to show you. And it was such an incredible sort of experience. And I knew at that time, I remember seeing it, sort of all happen. And I was like, we're in great shape. Like, this is, you know, better than I could have ever imagined it to be. So I think it's it's the team. We knew the roles that we had to play. And we each brought our, most professional game, or most professionalism sort of to the game. And we had fun. And kudos to us. And I realize that's not always the case. I think Shole and Michelle would say exactly the same thing. So I think we're just blessed, and I am grateful to the two of them for what we all pulled off.
Shole and Michelle, anything to add to that?
Um, you know, I was just happy that Michelle didn't curse me later and go, "How did you get me into there's 1,000 words in this piece?" So, a lot of my job was also like just supporting Michelle through this, but because Michelle takes her work seriously, and I know she's going to beat herself up about these things, like, and so I'm just like, "Girl, you got it. It's all good." But one of the things I said to Colleen very early on was I appreciated that, and I think I actually said that you're not precious about your work, and the reason I said it was I read the play and it reads really well, but sometimes when you put things on its feet, a lot of those things don't work as well. And there's some really, there's times where there were 3 paragraphs of stuff, but it wasn't. It was interesting, but it reads well, but it wasn't getting us anywhere dramatically. And so, Michelle and I would be working on something, and she's like, "What do you think about this?" And we would send things to Colleen, and Colleen was very gracious, and she let us take her work. And really, our goal was not to. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with it. It was just trying to get a scene, to the end better, because it would kind of start and it would get stopped and things. So I really appreciated that. I appreciated that Colleen trusted us, because we didn't tell you to go away completely, but we just wanted to work on it because it's also for both of us, this is your work, and I want to, and I think, we said we always want to honor your work. And I want to make sure that, both of us, we are doing what your intention is. So that's why, we're never afraid to ask you questions or things like that, because we want to make sure that we're honoring, what you want out of this, but also we want to also go, all right, for an audience to see this, we want to also keep them engaged, keep them in the story. So, but the joy is that the 3 of us have had a wonderful working relationship, and Colleen has been wonderful and supportive. And Michelle, I'm just like, I kind of with Michelle, I'm like, you tell me what you need at today's rehearsal,
Right.
because she came in and she had such a big task and did it so
Right.
beautifully. And but I think it was just about the support. And that's the one thing about, I think, all of us. It was a very supportive atmosphere. I think we were all on the same page. And I think that we all believed in this story and believed in what it had to say. So it was great fun. And, when you're doing a one night show where you have, an hour and a half in the theater the night before to like walk through, it's a tight experience. And luckily everybody united. So, oh my gosh, the people there were so gracious and so lovely. We have probably thanked them over and over between all of us for just their generosity and stuff. But it was just a lovely experience. And it was really nice because I think I had said to Colleen after reading the play, I said, this needs to be in front of an audience, because as we know, I can read something and it reads well, but I want to see, we want to see how people respond to it. Are there places that people don't get? Is there something they don't understand? And we had some friends that we invited to do a run, and we were pleasantly surprised that they were like, no, it's all really, really clear. And it's nice to see it with an audience, because I think it gives you information. And I just feel like all 3 of us, it was truly very collaborative, and you don't get that all the time. And for me, I was just very proud of that. So when we finished the show that night, I was like, "You 2 go in the audience," and I said, "Richard and I are throwing clothes in a trunk, and we're gonna be gone." But I really wanted you guys to go to the audience because I wanted you to get the accolades. I was like, "We got to break a set down." So, but that's kind of what our work to life has been together. It's Colleen's like, I'll get the suitcase. They were like, okay, and then we'll do this. So I feel like there's always been this handing it off. I volunteered my husband to cut Michelle's hair for the show, and he and was kind enough to come and do it that night. So there was a lot of that. But a pleasure, an absolute pleasure, and just from start to finish, it was just a lovely way to work with people.
Yeah. All of that. Theater isn't created in a vacuum. It may mean like this felt like an Olympic sport to me a little bit, because we would get together and it's not created in a vacuum, right? So we have all of the ideas and all of the creative things. And then what happens is during the week, then I have to do my skates around the ice rink, and I have to lift the weights and do the things. And then we get back together and collaborate again. So um, it was different in that sense for me because generally with any play, as you undoubtedly know and your audience knows, is that, you're doing a lot of that together in rehearsal. And with a one-person show, there are so many reps that have to be done all by yourself. It's almost like more like being a musician or an athlete. You're having to go through it, go through it, go through it, and then you show it, and then you rehearse, and then you go through it again a bunch. So that was sort of what the experience was for me. It was delightful, and I would find stuff by myself all the time. And once you get into the flow, it's a really marvelous place to be.
I love the athlete reference, Michelle, because the sort of 24 hours before the play, and then frankly afterwards, you know, I was really like, what is it that you need from us so that you can deliver the performance that you want to deliver? You
Right.
know,
I would love to do
I'm,
that.
I'm a marathon runner. I do all of this. So it's all about like, okay, when am I sleeping? When am I eating? When am I peeing? When am I taking the nap? And I was like, what is it that you need from us? And Michelle was able to give me and Shole very specific instructions. And I remember thinking like the 45 minutes before this play were to begin, I'm like, okay, she told us she wants everyone out of the room. Like it was all very sort of, whatever she needed so that she could go out and do, essentially a 1 hour athletic performance. And then, I loved her process afterwards. She just needed some time. I was like, we were having a celebration dinner and it was like Michelle just needed some time to kind of, oh, okay. And I think we were all exhausted the next day, emotionally exhausted, thrilled, but whatever. But I think the athletic performance thing is a terrific analogy.
Mhm. Yeah. Everybody's process is different. You ask any actor, you're going to get 15,000 different responses.
Okay. I only know you.
Right.
No, it's true because there are people I know, I've worked with people who sort of walk in at half hour, throw their stuff down and they go. And
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
there are other people I know who have to come in an hour before and they have to warm up and they have a very specific ritual. And you respect all
You
of
have
it.
to respect that.
Yeah, Michelle, as she says, everybody's process is different. And also, sometimes I know if I'm in a show, a lot of times when I'm done with the show, I'm like, I throw my costume on a rack and I go, but I know other people who take a moment. It also depends on the piece you're working on too. Like, to Michelle's point, this was an Olympic sport for her. But also it's an emotional journey too. It's a real arc for this character, And so sometimes when you're doing something that's lighter, sometimes you're like, when you're done, it just feels, it's like, okay, I can take the costume off. I can go out somewhere, maybe have a drink with people or something. I think every piece is different and every actor is different in how we approach it. And truly for us, we were just like, yeah, Michelle, just tell me what you need, and it was
Mhm.
just about support.
So on that note, um, I guess just in closing, for all of you, and I'd like to go to Colleen first since this is her debut foray into playwriting. If you, Colleen, have any advice for anyone wanting to start their creative journey, what have you learned having been on this creative journey, and what would you like to sort of dispense to any aspiring artists out there?
Well, I would start with the first 1,000 words. Put it down on paper. If you've got an idea that you think is important to tell, um, you know, put those first 1,000 words down. I'm kind of a nerd, so it was important to me to sort of take a class and learn how to do it correctly. That's just, Michelle's laughing. That's kind of who I am.
Makes sense.
And there are, if it's if you're not from the theater community, there are resources out there that can help you, put structure to your words and, make it a real script. And I think what you learn in that process is, first of all, you're oftentimes in classes with people who are trying to do exactly the same thing. And it's fabulous to get their input and then to provide them with input. I mean, it's just kind of a learning process. And you'll find that your words, get better and better and better. And then I think once you've got that process, once you've got like a final script in your hand that you're like, wow, this is actually ready. I think it's then a matter of, there's this whole thing to learn about submitting your script for to festivals and to, theaters that are looking for new work. And you're going to kind of put your business, fortunately, I'm a business person, so like I figured out how to kind of do that. Um, but then you got to kind of keep knocking on doors. And then, when you do get accepted at a festival, I had this kind of, oh my gosh moment, like, now what do I do? And, so again, start with 1,000 words, put yourself in a situation where you can complete the script and then, figure out how to get it out, for consideration. And then, when you do get accepted for a festival, be lucky enough to have, a Shole and Michelle at your side, to sort of make it real. And it, that's what I would say. Enjoy the ride because it's quite the adventure.
I kind of fell into directing as an actor, and somebody saw something, and I'm one of those people. I think a lot of people in the theater, Michelle would probably say, somebody would say, "Can you do this?" And I would say, "Yes, absolutely." I had no idea. Like, I can't tell you how many times I said I could do something and had to go learn it. Um, I think the thing with directing, you can take classes, you can learn all the sort of the basics of it. Um, because I know I would say, like, the first time I directed something, I came in with the 3-ring binder and everything marked up, and I have learned over the years that I trust the material, because the material is what you are really there to do. And trust your instincts on things, trust your gut, because I think that I've learned that I sometimes would try to veer off course and I would see things differently. And for this piece, I purposely said, I want to keep it very bare bones because it's about storytelling. We had a couple of sound cues in there, and I said to Colleen, I think we're not going to do them. And we found a way to create the sound cues or as a reaction that Michelle would give, because I didn't want to muddy the piece. So I think that you approach everything, you have to look at it, you have to trust the source material, because my job is to bring that material to life. Now we interpret things differently, and that's what's sort of interesting to see it. We see it, Michelle will appreciate, like a Shakespeare piece. People will interpret this and put it in this world and put it in this costume, but really, what is the story of that? And so as a director, my job here is to find a way to tell the story as honestly and truthfully as I can, and also support the people that are performing it, the people writing it. So I have an interesting balance. I'm sort of like the scales here, because in this production, I wanted to make sure that I was giving Colleen the things that she saw and wanted, also to support Michelle in giving her what she needed, and also to just get the story across. So I think sometimes, I think as I've grown older in this world and in the theater, it's just about trusting yourself. It's about having confidence in your abilities, in your thought process. I think when I was younger, I think I wanted to blow everything up and make everything big and pretty, and you learn. I think that's just a process of aging and having some maturity. That it's okay to pull back, and it's okay for things to be simple, because sometimes simple speaks louder, or simple tells you a lot more. Now, this is not a play where we need bells and whistles, and I don't think we do. But there are plays that certainly need it. So it's just about trust. It's trusting yourself, having that confidence, and just really being a storyteller.
I mean, I would just say persist. Persistence is everything. persistence, imagination, just believe in yourself, because honestly, you bet on yourself, you're gonna make it. You know what your commodity is, and you can do it. It's just honestly about getting out there, doing the work, showing up at the page. Just keep on keeping on. Don't give up. Don't give up the fight.
Great. Great words from the best actress at United Solo Festival.
Yay.
Yay. All right. All right. Well, we're at a little over an hour, I believe. So yeah, I just want to thank you all for agreeing to chat. I yeah, and thank you, Colleen, again for inviting me. It was such a surprise getting your message on LinkedIn of all places. But
Well, let me
no, this
just
was
say, Jessica, I mean, for those people, again, I'm a business person, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, how am I going to find, theater folks who might want to come to the play and talk about it afterwards? And I went to LinkedIn and I reached out to about 150 different, people in the theater industry in the city. And, sure, it was a little, it took me a couple of hours and, I had a little, you know, thing that I wanted. And, kudos to you for responding. So, and then coming and then reaching out afterwards. So, you did all the right things on your end. So kudos to you.
Thank
Well,
you,
you did.
Jessica. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
no thanks. And thanks for a great night at the theater. It
Thank
was
you.
again really compelling. And a very important message and story. Thank
Okay.
you, Joel. Thank you, Michelle. Nice to meet you both. And hope to see more of you. And yeah, keep me posted. Let me know if there are any more performances of the
We'll
play,
let you
or
know.
if you
Fingers
have any
crossed,
more plays
in
in
Chicago.
the
We'll get you
pipeline.
back here.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to check it out.
Okay, great.
All right. So good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Shole and
Thank you
Michelle,
so
thank
much.
you. Good night.
Night, everybody.
Visit iworewhatwhen.com and follow the show on Instagram at iworewhatwhen_play for news about future productions. Cultivate is produced, presented, and conceived by Jessica Taghap and is a resident artist production. Our intro music is by Bowden Kuzman and our outro is by Taffy Rhythm. New episodes available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and here on Substack, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube and get updates on residentartist.substack.com.